All right. Can you guys hear me okay? I think this was on before. I don't know if it is now. Well, I thank you for joining me today. I run a statewide organization and we never really have called ourselves community scientists before, but now we do. And so I'm going to tell you a bit of the story of that. And I'm going to start in big landscape or big legislative concepts to smaller legislative concepts. But before I do that, I will tell you a bit about the Colorado Native Plant Society. We already engaged in some of this. We want to get to know each other. We want to figure out what we have in common and also learn how we could solve those problems using ideas that other organizations might have employed. And essentially, as is the theme of this conference, we just want to figure out how we can all work together to be great stewards of this landscape that we share. So I have one last activity for you because the beginning of my story is about native plants. And not a lot of people even know what native plants are, but you're hearing tons of stuff about them, like with Codex and various CPW initiatives. So if you don't mind standing up one more time. Our last icebreaker. They've been here for a long time, and there's definitely conversations about what does it mean to be native? How long are we talking? And there are plants that came over with colonialism that are pretty fully integrated into indigenous uses, right? For medicines, foods, etc. But barring any more complex conversation, just think about how our native plants are the ones that have been here a long time, longer than us. And the history of our society, we're almost 50 years old. And I find it really interesting that this society was formed a half century ago because people were really concerned about the native plants and species of Colorado 50 years ago. And here we are still concerned and maybe making the biggest strides we've made in this long history. And I teach at the university, so I definitely like to tell the biggest lecture possible. And another thing to keep in mind is that in the mid 20th century, our public lands were forming, their management strategies were being developed, our environmental legislation was coming to pass. And so we were in that age of formation, but now we are in the age of restoration. It's the UN age of restoration, and all nations are facing similar questions and challenges that we're facing today. So we're not in this alone. The statewide organization called the Colorado Native Plant Society operates on two spheres. We have committees that meet virtually, and they really address topical areas that we focus on and meet our mission. So of note in the last couple of years, like the Field Studies Committee has really worked on the Adopt a Rare Plant program. This was actually a historic program that had fallen out of practice, and we received a bequest from one of our founding members, and that helped us to reunite the Adopt a Rare Plant program with our favorite partner, the Colorado Natural Heritage Program. And now I will conclude my talk by talking to you about the Statewide Natural Heritage Survey, which is basically Gen 2 on this Adopt a Rare Plant program in terms of our involvement. We also have education and horticulture committees, which I won't be talking about too much today, but keeping in mind everything I do talk about is also happening in the horticultural sphere. And so we can work on landscapes large and small to solve these issues and questions of how do we move forward for a climate resilient future. And I will primarily talk to you about the Restoration Committee. So it was really lovely, and I cannot take credit for it. But the Region 2 USDA USFS vegetation specialist approached me and said, do you think the Colorado Native Plant Society could implement the Rocky Mountain Native Plant Materials Program? And of course I said yes. And they said, who do you want to work with? And I said, Colorado Natural Heritage Program. So we also partner on this project. And I will talk to you a lot about this. And before I get there, we are statewide. We have over 2,000 members. We are a member organization. I urge you to become a member. And there are chapters all over the state. And these are all volunteer organized chapters. I'm actually the first executive director, and I was a chapter chair volunteer before here in Colorado Springs. And so we really are growing in our capacity as we have been able to hire staff for the first time. So today I want to talk to you about the National Native Seed Strategy, which almost no one knows anything about. Have you ever heard of the National Seed Strategy? In the next set of slides, I'm trying to rely on primary literature. I am giving you the straightest talk I can give you about what the seed strategy is without my own interpretation. And so these documents, I can make them available to you via the Whova app. But essentially, this landmark strategy for rehabilitation and restoration looks a lot like what we're talking about in the statewide situation. But we need a more coordinated approach for stabilizing, rehabilitating, and restoring our landscapes. Because after the 100 years or so of us using this landscape, it needs help, and it needs help for the future. One big piece to this is like we have no seed industry. So going back even earlier than the legislation I just described to you, in the early 20th century, we had the Homestead Act. Have you ever heard of the Homestead Act? Yeah, so how did we settle the American West? We gave parcels of land away, but we told people that they had to improve the land. So what did they do? They attempted to raise cattle. And what seeds did they use to build their range? The seeds they brought with them from the old world. And so the idea of us having a native seed industry is a kind of new concept in the last couple of decades. If we can work together to build a seed bank, we'll be able to address these questions that we have in the landscape that are threatening our survival, right? And these stressors you all are very deeply familiar with. We have non-native plants also brought by our colonial forebears, and we have wildfire issues and drought issues and habitat modification, land overuse, climate change. Lots of difficult things to attack. So the National Seed Strategy has a vision to put the right seed in the right place at the right time. And this mission piece about having an available genetically appropriate seed bank for restoration is something that took me a little while to figure out in my mind. How are we doing that, right? Because we're not geneticists, but we collect seeds and we aggregate them across ecoregions. That's why we started in our common geography icebreakers, that as we bring these seeds together and increase them in an agricultural setting and make them available for restoration, we've increased their genetic diversity by increasing the locations from which we collect, and then rearing those seeds to make new seeds, right? So some of those genotypes will hopefully work no matter what happens with the climate, and that is the goal there. So I want to point out here some of the first pieces of federal legislation that had the word native in it, right? The idea that we have native plants wasn't even something we were talking about in a political sense. And here we have some language from the first presidential memorandum that we're going to recognize the importance of healthy native plant communities. And these native plant communities, they create habitat for animals, they provide ecosystem services, and they have intrinsic and irreplaceable value, right? That will become increasingly important over time because we don't know what most of the organisms in our world are doing, how they're behaving, how they're reacting to these changes and threats to the landscape. So what I see too, because one of my first jobs in life was working for the Forest Service as a trail crew worker, right? Back in the day, 25 years ago, the Forest Service did all its own work, right? A lot of land managing agencies did. But now they're really showing that they want to work with us, the private sector, to accomplish these goals. And I find that to be another part of this shift that has come with the age of restoration. And just to note that we would never collect seeds of rare species, nor are we interested in commercial species. And so hopefully at the end, we'll be able to provide a resource for land managers to improve their landscapes. So there are 4 goals of this strategy, right? We gotta first know what seeds we need or want, right, for restoration, and find them on the landscape, which is what I'll talk to you about. And goal 2, we need to do a lot of research. And an example I like to present here is like, just put in your mind for a second, a research question. What's a question you might ask about a plant? And if you want to offer, raise your hand. Yes. How long does it live? Now, how many plant species do we have in Colorado? Your question, how long does it live? Right? If we knew the answer to that across every species, we have thousands of research questions, right? And so there is a lot of work to be done to just know more, right? And this is one of the important parts of our tribal communications, is ways of knowing might not involve standard traditional scientific methods, right? They might be conversation delivered, right? How can we learn from our elders about what plants are doing and what they might be useful for and what organisms are using these plants? So goal 3 is another huge topic. We need tools to help land managers solve these problems. And currently we're sort of limited in the silos of our land managing parameters. CDOT has a tool. Colorado Extension has a tool. CPW has a tool. Everyone has tools. But how are we going to bring these together for maximum impact? Yes. Absolutely. Well, that is very perceptive. I will tell you that I have been talking to CDOT for a couple of years now. They keep asking us about the substitution. And I'm like, how about we stop having that conversation? How about you query your district managers and get their seed list? Let's first highlight those seed lists and figure out A, which ones are native, and B, which ones are common across all districts. And then we've narrowed this massive pool into maybe a couple dozen plants where like could be flexible across these landscapes. Could we focus on these resources rather than talking about the substitutions? Because if you're a person like me, no substitution is going to be good enough. No smooth brome is not good enough. And another tangent I'm going to add right here is there's like 2 pieces of legislation that are being written right now, and people keep coming at me about this phrasing. And one of the phrases is native plants and locally adapted species. Those are the plants that should be used. And I'm like, no, locally adapted species are crested wheatgrass and smooth brome and cheatgrass and all the things we're trying to get rid of. Another piece of legislation came out in first draft that was like native plants and mixed species. And we were like, what's a mixed species? That is not definable, and it doesn't mean anything across large scales, but it is leaving the door open to continuing to use non-native species. So we need to think deeply about how we can affect the legislative process by simply engaging. A person who has this mind can see that phrase in a 15-page legislative document and say, this is going to break it. So just some thoughts. And finally, goal 4, we need strategies to talk to each other. We're at this lovely conference. This is a great example. And the Colorado Native Plant Society is really good at this one because we have so many members who are motivated, and self-motivated and they're talking to each other. And a big thing we do in our chapters is talk to the other organizations like, hey, how about you come over and tell us what you do? And that helps to build all of our memberships and share this internal and external communication. I will go back here one more second and say no federal manager has talking to the public in their job description unless they're the visitor information specialist or the public relations officer, right? So just being present with your land manager, showing up for volunteer events, like you're helping that communication strategy flow, and there's really no strategy in place, right? So finally, success looks like people in this room caring about it, botanists, researchers, farmers, nursery workers, and restoration ecologists, learning how to put the right seed in the right place at the right time. And I will remind that the presentation is based on these documents. And there are some other references. You can basically just Google this. There's a BLM page with all of these cool documents on it. And now I'll talk to you about what we're doing here in Colorado. And this could take place in your sphere. Everyone here could be a part of this, and your organization could. So in order to meet the demands I just talked to you about, we collect seeds. We collect seeds on Forest Service property. We do not retain any of the seeds. We give them all to the Forest Service. The seeds are then sent to federal contract nursery in Coeur d'Alene or Bend, Oregon, and we are now starting to work a bit more with the Meeker Plant Materials Center. We collect the seeds, they get sent off, they get grown up in an agricultural setting and then reharvested and brought back for storage for use of future restoration. Now, lots of entities on all levels are working on this, from municipalities to open space to Forest Service, all the CPW, all the organizations that manage land are starting to think about these processes. So all seed collection starts with scouting, and this is really a way that you can be a couch-bound community scientist. Raise your hand if you have iNaturalist on your phone. Okay, super. We're going to work in iNaturalist today a little bit. Part of what we've been doing is trying to find our target species on the landscape. The first year we worked on it, we drove 12,000 miles between CNHP and CoNPS. And we were like, this does not make any sense, right? The ecological footprint to make a climate resilient seed bank can't involve 12,000 miles. So I started to think about how we could use iNaturalist more and more. And I happen to have written my dissertation about how to train citizen scientists to collect reliable data. So when I graduated, iNat was just coming out, and I just think it's the best thing since sliced bread. And recently, a report conclusion came out indicating that 95% of the time that iNet suggests a species, it's correct. So we're kind of getting out of the space of like deeply concerned about the reliability of this data. People are using it in many, many applications. There's really cool webinars about all the ways people are using these data. Other cool thing about it is it's very accessible for all volunteers, all community scientists. Like first year we ran the program, we gave people guest logins to our Esri account, but that just doesn't work. Like you can't have that many people touching so much sensitive data. And you might have been in the Codex talk before. Does anyone know what Codex is? The Colorado Data Explorer. Reliability is about not messing stuff up in a system like that. So iNet makes a really nice soft landing where community members can contribute data and then it can be curated by the professional scientists. We've also used quite a bit this neat website that not many people know about. It's southwestcoloradowildflowers.org, more affectionately known as SciNet. And this is basically digital herbaria records. So you can look at maps just like an INAT and figure out where plants are based on their digitized herbaria. We build a species identification guide every year because the number one question I get from people is like, how do you know that you're collecting the right seed? Well, you have to learn a thing or two about identifying plants. So our species guide really helps people to link their observational behavior to the dichotomous key, the Flora of Colorado by Jennifer Ackerfield, and that's basically like the definition of the plant, right? So if you had taken a picture that had shown the parts of the plant that were used in the flora, you would be getting really close to very reliable data collection and then therefore seed collection. If you are interested, this looks like looking for the species. You can do that on INAT by joining our project and then looking for our target species. And it doesn't have to be observations that you alone have chosen. It can also be observations that other people have chosen or made of the species of interest. We run all of this stuff through our restoration committee. As I mentioned before, the restoration committee meets I think on the first Friday of every month, but it's in our calendar, and the QR codes on the bookmarks go to our event calendar. You're welcome to join us at any programming anywhere in the state, no matter whether you're a member or not. And all the programming is free. So finally, I'll mention we do have internships, and like currently we have CU Boulder geography interns, and we also have restoration interns that help to drive this program? Yeah, that's a great question and leads to my next slide, which is that. What do we do now, right? We might have solved in the county space like Boulder. You guys are the Boulder open space is far along in this process. Colorado Springs municipality. But it's like, what happens next, right? How do we get the plants? And so my problem statement on my life and career is the native plant materials are not currently available. So how do we make them available? To answer this next question, right? How do we go from seeds to actual native plant materials? We have recently been awarded the research grant from Jefferson County Open Space to do a native plant growth study. And one thing that has really moved quickly in Colorado Springs with Alex Crochet at the helm is native plant production. Alex does not use peat moss. We need to grow native plants in soils that they are familiar. We have two soil treatments. Basically, we grow seeds, native seeds, in a compost mineral mix. And when we do it for research, we also grow them in peat moss. And that is what a standard commercial nursery would use. Now, what is peat moss? I didn't put this slide in here, but it's a non-renewable resource. It is an organic resource, but it is non-renewable. Peat is grown in northern latitudes, and it is typically frozen under permafrost, right? It represents one of the largest carbon sinks that we have on the planet. And so when we harvest peat moss and put it in a Miracle-Gro potting soil bag, we're never going to recover from that. The removal of the carbon from the sink into the source, up into the atmosphere, no amount of gardening or restoration is really going to tip those carbon scales, right? So let's just stop doing it. Let's stop using peat moss as a growing medium because it really challenges the greater climate resilience goal. So people always want to know exactly what this looks like. The compost in the hort environment for the city is recycled horticultural waste. So there are still like annuals being planted, right? So there's some peat moss in that homegrown compost. And then the mineral soil that we use is called Cimarron Breeze. It's squeegee. It's basically the rock stuff you put between your flagstone patio. And it's about 30% clay, 30% sand, and 30% gravel. And you can see in the picture here what it looks like, right? It looks like rocks. And it has some compost in it. But this produces native seeds really well. Most importantly, too, and hopefully we will answer with this, is what happens when you plant natives out into the landscape that have been grown in peat or in this native soil that we are proprietary native soil. We're growing these plants in Colorado Springs, and we will be planting them out on North Table Mountain, and then community scientists will help us with the monitoring. So another form of ecological monitoring. And this is also a big part of our problem statement, right? More people need to know how to do this so we can actually have a robust native plant materials availability, but we just don't have that right now in Colorado. And what we found was that the compost mineral mix was really close chemically to our native soils. It's like really low in nutrition, right? Low in nitrogen species. The peat moss had, this isn't gonna mean anything, but 322 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. The native soil in the mix had 6 and 8 milligrams per liter. So just let your mind wrap around that. That's like 2 orders of magnitude more fertilization than the native soils provide. And so when we use a lot of fertilization, we are favoring the non-natives, right? We're letting those early cereal plants get what they need to take up the niche before the natives get there. But I digress. Now we are out of our national seed strategy concepts, and we are getting into the state of Colorado. I was kind of surprised in my conversations in the last day that not more people know about HB 241117. Raise your hand if you've ever heard about it. Okay, super. This literally was like the best day when this thing got passed. And so it was a long time coming. Another nonprofit, People and Pollinators Action Network, they were really instrumental in helping to write the legislation. Our fine prime sponsors were very helpful in pushing this through. We all testified on Capitol Hill, went through appropriations. It was just really wonderful to watch. The bottom line of this is, before HB 241117, CPW didn't really recognize invertebrates as wildlife, but now they do. And that is just so exciting, because another big conversation you hear in the popular media is about our pollinator decline. And 80% of the food we eat is pollinated. And guess what the pollinators eat? Native plants. So we are so excited about HB 241117, and this gives CPW the authority to understand and regulate rare plants and invertebrates. I knew from my life's work here that we were going to be brought to task because we know lots of stuff about native plants. We don't know a ton about invertebrates, but it's been super fun for me in the last year watching this go from community action to legislative action to implementation. Stage 2, and we're going to start working together. You know about Codex, right? It doesn't really talk to the community scientist. It's kind of like that big Esri environment where it's just so much data. How can we, as just ordinary people, make a contribution? And so we can contribute through the statewide Natural Heritage Survey. CNHP and CoNPS seek community scientists to go out there with their phones and take pictures of organisms. And it's just such a simple task, but what I have found in my own research is that photographs can be research grade data. And everyone is walking around with a device that can geolocate itself. With just your phone, you can really make a massive contribution to our understanding about plants and wildlife in Colorado. And I'm going to switch over to some slides that come from our CNHP training for the statewide Natural Heritage Survey. this is something that no matter what your organization is doing, you can help and get your people involved in this. If you would like to follow me, you can use this QR code or just look up Statewide Natural Heritage Survey. You should probably get there. So I will just take a step back and say CNHP is really the protector of our data about the organisms that live here in Colorado, both flora and fauna. It's a large group of researchers, software professionals, planners, and they're helping us to understand our biota of Colorado. As I mentioned, they're our favorite partners. Our volunteers care about what they're doing, so it's a good fit. But then from us to every small community in Colorado, we rely on our relationships and partners to hit the ground running, right? So after this talk, please come and talk with me. We would love to partner with you. So the statewide natural heritage will increase our natural heritage data. And just this term natural heritage data, it's just basically information about the organisms in Colorado and the habitat types, right? So also ecological communities. And there are surveys across the map of rare species and habitats. And if you could help us get involved, we could really expand our reach, right? Just like with the seed collection, if you get involved on iNaturalist, you can prevent so much driving, which would be in itself an excellent contribution. And we want to connect with our tribes to empower them in collection of natural heritage data. And this is a really key part of the RPI conversation, right? So CNHP is working with the regional partnerships to engage the statewide natural heritage survey. Eventually, the data that you collect through your phone will go into Codex, but it doesn't do that right now. So why the statewide natural heritage survey? Same things that I was talking about with the founding of the organization CoNPS. We've got a lot of threats on the landscape, and we have a lot of people. But we have huge data gaps, huge areas where data is not being collected. Here we see on the left counties that are surveyed by the Natural Heritage Program. But look on the right, the eastern part of the state, like we have got to love up on them. And here on the right, we're looking at the undersurveyed areas. So we look at the regional partnerships. I stare at this map. I literally look at this map every day because I run a statewide organization and we're everywhere. In 2025, we want to focus on 21 counties within 7 regional partnerships. And we want to engage community scientists in this. And hopefully by the end of today, you will have joined this project so you can affect change. Raise your hand if you live in one of the counties that is colored right now. Not too many, but you might find yourself there, right? Absolutely. All right. So before I get too far, I just want to say on the invertebrate side, like we worked with Cersei Society for the last 2 years to help train people, to work in the Bumblebee Atlas. I know, but I don't know the details that CPW will be expanding this effort. Much like the Adopt a Rare Plant program is expanded, Bumblebee Atlas will continue to exist, but the surveying of invertebrates of all kinds of invertebrates will become more important. Let's go back here to this QR code. So, are you interested in joining the project? And this is going to take you to a cool web page that gives you so much more information than I have given you here. If you go onto community engagement, you'll find just the presentation slides, but also the recorded training. Like I said, we hope to have field mentoring events in all of our chapters, and those will get scheduled faster if people come and ask for them, right? Yeah, we want to do this. Come and help us. There's a lot of videos here. And one thing I wanted to look at is, so there's a tracking list, right? And if you download the list, which I have done here, you can sort it by your county or wherever you are, sort it by the type of flora or fauna that you might be interested in. And this list will continue to be updated as I understand it. Totally fine for you to take pictures of anything, right? Inside the project, we want to focus on these species. So you can access that if you go to this webpage. And we have lots of people here, some of whom might want to offer feedback about this program. I wanted to show you also what the project name is for the seed collection. It's CoNPS R2 NPMP Seed Scouting. In our project, because we don't have so many different species, we actually restrict the project, so it only lets you upload the target species. So it's a little bit different. Also, our target species are not rare, so it's more likely you're going to find observations and be able to contribute data here. And once you're in projects, like once thank you for noting this, because I did let this go over my head. You have to get into a project on your computer. The last thing I wanted to know is, you can see I've joined lots of projects in the past, and most of them have been city nature challenges. And this is coming up right now, April 25th through the 28th. It's an international effort for people to do exactly what I just described for you. Please join a local effort or find time this weekend to go out. All your observations will help to contribute. I know Denver, Boulder, some other cities are involved in the City Nature Challenge. The last thing I'll say is, maybe you are doing the things that I talked about or you want to do them. Please invite us to help train you. We're super good at identifying plants. And we use a strategy that I think works really well. We start with known observations and then key backwards, right? So like if you know that it's a great blanket flower, you can just go backwards in the key and then look forwards and say, okay, I would have had to take a picture of the bracts. I would have had to see that the leaves were opposite or whatever it was. And it kind of trains you to be a better photographer. If you're interested, we are leading these trainings. And then finally, lots of people are asking us about the seed collection piece. Like the federal example I gave you is the biggest example, but see, we don't have a Colorado seed strategy yet, I don't think, but there's a Wyoming seed strategy. Lots of states have them, and lots of counties are starting to have native plant materials programs. So similar work is happening at all levels, and we can help you figure out how to get that off the ground. Finally, one of our longtime members and sponsors is leading an ecological restoration training on May 5th. If you're not familiar, the Certified Ecological Restoration Practitioners Program is run by the Society for Ecological Restoration, which is an international society, which is having their World Conference in Denver this fall, which we're super excited about. And actually, our wildflower ID training got accepted as a training symposium. So if you are going to be at SCR, please reach out. We will be running a training there.